The NFL finds itself in court very often. So does baseball, so do teams, so do individuals. Listen, if you're not finding yourself sued, then you're not doing your work. So I get it. There is something that's going on that was announced yesterday with the NFL that is going to cause the owners to have to get together and have a real meeting about this. You remember we told you about the Gruden case. John Gruden, former coach, got let go, had some emails that were not pleasant, but is claiming that there was a conspiracy against John Gruden. The NFL claimed, let's put it in arbitration. John Gruden said, no, I want it in public, and now it's in public. Remember, we talked about that. There's another lawsuit that's going on that the NFL owners get updated on every quarter, if not more. And that is the defensive coordinator of the Vikings, former head coach of the Dolphins, Brian Flores, who basically sued the NFL and certain teams and individuals for not giving minority candidates the proper look. Let's say it as nicely as we can. How it is that Brian Flores has a job in the NFL is beyond me, but not my point today. There has been a back and forth brawl, legally speaking, between the NFL and Flores about what is this case going to look like. The NFL has been clear. This case looks like an arbitration. It's an arbitrator of our choosing. You signed a document that says that anything you do when you're against the NFL will be an arbitration. Any issue that comes out of your contract, any issue that is born from anything related to you will be settled and solved by the commissioner, by arbitration. Well, Brian Flores wanted a public hearing. Brian Flores wanted it out of arbitration. There have been rulings where Brian Flores has prevailed, where the courts have said this cannot be inside the arbitration process that exists in the NFL. This case needs to be heard outside it. Well, the NFL has appealed it and appealed it. And yesterday they lost another appeal. And the judge at the U.S. Court of Appeals in the Second Circuit, they basically made it very clear that there is no reason in the world that this case ought to be before a state-controlled arbitration system. And I say state-controlled because that's what Goodell is. That's what the NFL is. You cannot sue someone and have that person decide whether or not this is a suit that is worthy of attention, if not settlement, if not actual decision. Why does this matter? Because when you buy a team, you sign documents. When you are an employee of a team, you sign documents. Every one of these documents is very clear that you are subjecting yourself to arbitration. They're very clear about the legal fees that you have to pay for the other side if you sue the NFL. They're very clear about the situs of the case. They're very clear about everything. It's right there in the four corners of a document that you sign that 98.6% of owners do not even read. As a non-owner president, 1.4%er, I can tell you that I did read these arbitration clauses that exist in baseball. I did talk about them with my attorneys at Proskauer Rose, the #1 sports attorney, period, in Wayne Katz. And it was basically stated to me in as simple language as possible, this stinks. But I'm happy to go back to the league office and to the lawyers inside the league office with any changes you have to their boilerplate contract. But I promise you, they're going to tell you to bugger off. They're not going to change it because having things out of the public eye is a concept. The reality when it happens, because lawsuits are actually fired and you may be forced to be in a public setting, you've got to fight tooth and nail if you're the NFL to make it so nobody can do that to them. You cannot put me in town square to get flogged. You cannot put me on the stand in front of a judge, in front of a jury, and make me show you things in discovery that I otherwise never would have shown you. You can't make me do this. Therefore, You're going to sign your agreement that you won't make me do this. Brian Flores had an arbitration provision in his contract. You can bet. But Brian Flores didn't care. John Gruden didn't care. They pushed and they pushed and they pushed and they pushed. And their sole reason is not money. Brian Flores' sole reason is not to get an interview as a head coach. The sole reason is to embarrass the National Football League and to bring them down a notch, or 10, or 69. The purpose of the lawsuit is to let the world know that this fiefdom that is the owners controls the fans, controls the players in a way that would otherwise make you feel super uncomfortable. When you don't want money as your settlement, do you remember what I told you about that? It makes it super hard to settle with you. And then when you end up on the losing side of a bunch of arguments, and then the NFL goes back to Brian Flores and says, listen, can we settle this? And then Brian Flores is going to say to him, settle? I've got you by the curlies. I'm not settling with you. I'll see you in court. John Gruden's doing the same thing. Settle? I don't want your millions. I want to see you squirming in court. I want to see you put your hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me. George Burns reference. Oh God, part 1. So help me. That always made me laugh. The NFL needs to make a change here. And I want to give them a suggestion because I know they're listening. If you want to avoid the New York courts, it is way easier to have a provision that allows for a site of a lawsuit to be in a different place where you do business, and that is going to be more followed by the courts and the appellate courts when inside there is a rule that this contract will be construed under the laws of Delaware. Any lawsuit brought about will be held in Delaware, in the Delaware court system. When the courts see that there's an arbitration provision and then know that it's actually not independent arbitrators, that cuts to their sense of right, their sense of fairness. So therefore, you've got to change your boilerplate contracts with owners, with players, that talks about where you're going to do what you're going to do, that explains the civil procedure part of it, that explains how you're going to get jurisdiction or waive jurisdiction to get into a different courtroom. But you can no longer circulate agreements that say arbitration or bust. You can no longer circulate agreements where you are doing something that you know will be challenged and then you've seen that you're going to lose time and time again. You can't do it anymore. The NFL will hem and haw. They're going to get their legal department together. They're going to call some of the great law firms they work with, and they're going to start to figure out how to change their core contract, their uniform contract, how to change what owners sign. Mark my words, it's happening. Meanwhile, Roger Goodell is going to have to pick up the phone and call Brian Flores. He's going to have to pick up the phone and call John Gruden, and he's going to have to say, what's the number, baby?